So I get to do a TED Talk. Cool. Wait, I'm not qualified. I haven't done any commendable feat. Oh no, the speakers on TED Talks are so inspirational and capturing. I can't do that. This is going to take a lot of research. Focus now. I need to start working on this. Confusing, right? Well, after a lot of deliberation, I decided the best way to introduce myself would be to paint a picture of my mind. Every waking hour of the day, my brain is in constant overdrive. As I stand here speaking to you guys, there are a dozen other things on my mind. So who am I? The answer to that question is a pretty average high school senior. I'm passionate about sports, specifically hockey. When I was 6 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I love to run, far. My whole life, I've dealt with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Academically, I do well, and as I've grown older, I've began taking my studies more seriously. For longer than I can remember, I've struggled with Tourette syndrome, something most of you have never even heard of. But hey, I'm a pretty average high school senior, and if it hadn't been for my quirky introduction, you might even use the word normal to describe me. Normal. It's a word that's used so often, but what does it really mean to be normal? It's defined as conforming to a standard, typical, usual, or expected. The concept fits the theme of innovation, the very essence of doing things differently, pretty well. Having gotten some of my personal qualifications out of the way, I want to share my own stories with you. The least known of my 3 diagnoses, my Tourette syndrome, is the one that has created the biggest challenges for me. Tourette syndrome, also known as TS, is a neurological disorder which results in repetitive involuntary movements and vocalizations called tics. Now, the best way to describe a tic is by comparing it to a feeling everyone can relate to, an itch. Imagine you have an itch, say on your back. You really want to scratch it, and the longer you wait to do so, the stronger that urge gets. Eventually, the urge becomes so strong that you cave in and scratch your back. That's essentially the same process as a tic, except it continues to come back over and over again. Growing up with Tourette syndrome, I struggled a lot with acceptance amongst my peers. It wasn't the fact that I was left out or excluded. It was an inner struggle. Every time I ticked at school, I would feel as though I'd done something wrong. I would get embarrassed. I knew I was different, and I constantly worried about not being normal. As I grew older, I began spending more time with friends outside of school. This led to a new problem. People started to ask me what was wrong when I ticked. At the time, my worst tic was blinking my eyes repeatedly, and whenever anyone would ask, I would defensively blurt out, "I have something in my eye, okay?" I was always ashamed of myself, but I had no reason to be. When I finally realized this, and a close friend mentioned my tic again, I decided to explain what it was. The reaction was more curious than taken aback, and before I knew it, I was answering questions. Being able to speak openly about my Tourette's made me begin to question the importance of being normal. My perspective started to change, and I no longer felt the urge to hide my differences. I am just starting on my journey in the world of Tourette's, and this incident paved the way for me to be open with anyone who asks. I have no reason to hide anything. I have found that by making myself vulnerable, people have been more open to sharing their own stories with me as well. Although my Tourette syndrome has created the most noticeable struggles for me due to their apparentness, my ADHD and OCD have come with challenges of their own. I'm so OCD. It's something I hear people say all the time. The term obsessive-compulsive disorder has become a verb, an adjective, something used to describe the desire to keep stuff straight or organized. I laugh when I hear people at school say this, because I can truly say I do have OCD, and I face a lot more problems than simply wanting to keep my room neat. The well-known symptoms of OCD are the compulsions. This is what people refer to when they use the term OCD as an adjective. It means my brain makes me think I need to perform something in a certain way, and if I don't, I'll go back and do it again. For example, at my house, we have a table right underneath our TV. When I finish eating, I put my plate on the table, and my utensils must be perfectly parallel to the television. If they're moved even an inch, I will immediately get up to fix them. My family and I will laugh at moments like these together because it's become something that's routine for me to do. The lesser-known symptoms of diagnosed OCD are the irrational ideas or concepts. For example, when I get the urge to perform a certain compulsion, I'll think to myself, if I don't do X, then X will happen. However, as I've grown older, I've gained a better ability to recognize and cope when I am being unrealistic. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more commonly known as ADHD, is the most well-known of my 3 diagnoses. It means that my brain is in constant overdrive. If something doesn't immediately pique my interest, I need to work very, very hard to focus on it. Having said that, I am quite the talker, so our current situation seems pretty fitting. Now, I know ADHD is a disorder. It's even in the title, but I've never seen it that way. My personality is clearly talkative and very energetic. Attention deficit and hyperactivity are genuinely 2 words that could be used to describe the challenges I've faced. To describe the way I think, I love to use the free fall analogy. Free falling is a writing technique where you sit for a predetermined amount of time and simply write without thinking or stopping. Once you're done, you're left with a very raw piece of work, but one that represents your most creative and compelling ideas. After free falling, you proceed to edit and refine your work for it to better represent the idea you're trying to bring across. This is the way my brain works, and it's what caused the most problems for me in elementary school. I constantly found myself getting in trouble for interrupting class. The most common comment on my report card was, Isaac needs to raise his hand when he has an idea he wants to share. As I've matured, I've learned to refine my thoughts before simply blurting them out. The ideas are still there, but the patience that now comes with them means that I can effectively contribute to class discussions without being a nuisance. Now, although there are many things I and the people around me have learned to love about my ADHD, one of which is the genuine excitement I always portray. When I get happy, it's clear. In comfortable environments, I'll even start singing. Now, I'm not talking about songs, though I love to do that too. I mean regular sentences. Mom, what's for dinner? Fettuccine and Alfredo sauce. To which I'll belt out, fettuccine and Alfredo sauce, as I walk back to my room. The amount of times my parents start laughing at how ridiculous I'm being is inexplicable. Adding to the list of positives, I attribute a portion of my athletic success to my ADHD. As a goaltender, there is an isolated amount of pressure and performance expected from me. I'm talking about Game 7 in the league finals, and it's double overtime. Someone comes in on a breakaway. Moments like these, when everybody else was stressed, are when I played my best. For anyone wondering, yes, I stopped that breakaway. The capability to perform under high amounts of pressure is something which I attribute to my ADHD. Since my thoughts are always chaotic, in stressful moments like the one I mentioned, I can compete at my best. Another characteristic of ADHD, which some view as an obstacle, though I appreciate, is the tendency to hyperfocus. This is exactly what it sounds like. I get a certain idea in my head, and it's all I can think about or what I want to do. Although people can complain about never being able to get something off their mind, this is the exact reason I get so driven to achieve certain things, such as running 30 kilometers, or next, a full marathon. Another instance where my hyperfocus can be seen is through my speaking engagements. At first, I casually wanted to get on a podcast, until I became hooked on the idea. I became very motivated to speak on a podcast, so I spent time reaching out to a variety of hosts who have podcasts surrounding the stories I just shared with you. Finally, I received a full interview. Since then, I've been a guest on both ADHD Essentials and ADHD Rewired, which have a combined viewership of nearly 10,000 listeners per episode. Sharing these stories, I realized that one word kept coming up. I kept talking about how I didn't feel normal, yet I couldn't even define the word. This piqued my curiosity, so I decided to spend some time researching what it really meant to be normal. Over the course of my studies, one word kept coming up: social norms. These are a set of unwritten rules which we obtain through family and social interactions. They vary from culture to culture and through different generations. Having said that, the one constant is the desire for society to conform to these norms. And this is where normality comes into play. The concept fits the theme of this conference because it's essentially an antonym to the word innovation. The first implies conforming to a preconceived standard, while the latter suggests creative thinking and shattering said preconceived standard. Very broad definitions lead to few answers as to what the difference between abnormal and normal are. But it essentially comes down to our perception of different behaviors and activities. For example, when I have noticeable tics, normal to me is squinting or clearing my throat every few seconds. It means that some nights, before I can fall asleep, I have to get up 10 times to close my door again, even though it's already sealed shut. Then, when I walk back to my bed in the pitch black, I'm going to be rolling my head the entire time. I can laugh at moments like this because it's become normal to me, but this may not be normal to you. So if our perceptions of normality are different, then does it truly exist? To talk about this, I want to go way back, for some of you in here, and explore what we're like as children. We are not born with the desire to fit in. At first, children simply do what they know, be themselves, and have fun. However, as we grow older and are exposed to more, our mentality changes. Eventually, those same children begin to work so hard to be the same as everybody else. The constant fear of standing out creates a society of the exact same people. But those differences we so desperately try to hide are what make us all unique. We need to harness that young, innocent mentality again and strive for a world where everyone can be different. Everyone can be true to themselves. Because we're all unique and different, it's safe to say that no, normality cannot be achieved. This notion is a subjective ideal, and no perception is the same. What's even more intriguing about this desire to be normal is that success itself is not normal. To achieve success, people must deviate from the norm. This does not only pertain to tangible success, but also emotional success. To be truly happy, one must avoid the urge to conform and be true to themselves. Now, when I mention the word success, different names will come to everyone. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, or even yourself. But the ones we can all connect with are those who made a widespread impact. To demonstrate this, I have chosen to share a quote by someone whose innovation resulted in one of the most beloved objects in the last decade, the iPhone. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things different. They're not fond of rules. You can quote them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. The power behind these words is undeniable. Not only did Steve Jobs create a brand new way of looking at technology, he built Apple's on pillars of innovation. To this day, the company continues to make strides in their sector. Apple commercials constantly catch my eye on TV due to their unique and creative characteristics. If Steve Jobs hadn't pushed the boundaries of society, he would never have made the breakthroughs he did. The beloved iPhone wouldn't exist, and the revolutionary Mac 1984 launch would never have happened. Over the course of my journey, I have faced many challenges, but the hardest one to overcome was my own mindset. Being able to embrace my differences has led me to achieve things I never imagined I could do. But more importantly, it has made me happy and confident with who I am. And this is what I want to leave you with today. Just one thing. Don't try to be normal. Thank you.